Now, let's jump into our first guest of the morning. Mark Jump from Jump Legal is with us in studio to talk about the current student loan crisis. Mark, how are you doing today?
Hi, Cameron. Nice to see you.
Good. Very nice to have you. For the viewers that don't know, talk about what the current student loan crisis is. How is it affecting the country?
Well, in my view, Cameron, right now the student loan crisis is probably the single biggest consumer debt crisis that we face as a nation. And the reason that I say that is that right now there's over $1 trillion of student loan debt. That's more than credit card debt.
$1 trillion?
$1 trillion. And for the first time in history, it's eclipsed credit card debt. And that's really never been the case before. And it's growing at a faster pace than any other category of unsecured debt. For instance, since 2003, it's almost tripled in size.
Wow. And it's not just affecting, a lot of people think student loan debt is affecting the students, but it's affecting the parents and the family members, right?
Well, that's correct. As a percentage of household debt, the amount of student loans that each American household carries is now much higher than it's ever been in history.
What is the difference between federal and private loans?
Well, that's a very good question, and it's very important to understand this difference because it's the key to understanding what your repayment options may be. A federal loan is one that's backed by the federal government in some form, and it's going to provide for a lot more aggressive repayment options. Private loan is just a loan between you and a lender, very similar to a credit card debt or your car loan or your mortgage. And unfortunately, if you have private student loans, you're not going to have the same options that if you have a federal loan.
What are some of those collection tactics that they use if you're not paying off your loans and you don't take care of it?
Well, it can be very problematic for individuals if they're not able to pay their student loans, if they fall into what we call default. And if that's the case, then they're going to be subject to collection that's very different than other collectors. And what I mean by that is your wages can be garnished without the student loan lender actually filing a lawsuit. They can take your tax refund without having to,
even asking, just doing it.
Without asking.
Oh my gosh.
And that's a bad thing to wake up to for sure. That's why it's very important if you have federal student loans to try to take advantage of some of the options that are available out there. And in particular, there's a lot of what we call income-based repayment options. And those are commonly referred to as IBR. There's also the payee option, which is a relatively new option for graduates that recently got out of school. And then there's the public loan forgiveness program, and that is really designed to help those individuals that work for the public sector. And a lot of people don't know about this because for those individuals, they can reduce their student loan repayment to as little as 10 years.
Wow.
And at the end of 10 years, whatever they're not able to pay back is essentially forgiven or wiped out. The IBR program, which I just mentioned, is a 25-year repayment program. And again, if you owe $100,000 in student loans and you were only able to repay $25,000 of it pursuant to an IBR program, then at the end of that 25 years, it's going to be wiped out. Now, you have to update that annually, and it's a very simple process. And unbelievably, only about 20% of those that are eligible for these programs take advantage of them. And
so there are tons of options available for people to tackle student loan.
if they have federal loans, there's unbelievably attractive options for individuals. And I've been practicing law for 20 years, and I started getting involved in student loan law because I just realized that so few people were taking advantage of the options that were available to them.
And you're still helping them. Tell us real quick about, you have a new book coming out in December, is
I
that
do,
right?
yeah, that's due. A new book, Book Smart, Dirt Poor, and it talks about the truth of student loans. And essentially what it's designed to do is to allow people to read my book and understand some of the things that I've mentioned here in our short period that we've had together this morning. It goes into a lot more detail, provides a lot of examples, and provides hopefully an opportunity for people to take some action, because the thing that happens more times than not, Cameron, is people come out of school, they're not making the kind of income that perhaps they hoped. And of course, it's their first job.
Right.
So that's common. And they just don't do anything. They allow their loans to go into default, and then they allow themselves to be subject to some of those collection procedures that we talked about. And I just don't want to see people going through that. There's so many more options out there. Our law firm provides it as a service for people. We help individuals work through the maze of forms and programs that are out there. And and hopefully we'll be able to help some people.
Great. Well, get their book, get your book. It's available December 1st.
Correct.
JumpLegal.com is where you can get it, correct?
Yes, sir.
Great, Mark. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. It's
thanks
been a
for having me.
All right, up next, get ready to fasten your e-belts again because we're going to see what Elisa Henry's cooking up at Skyward Grill. Don't go away.